I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them blue.
Welcome to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, powered by Jack's Angels, where we talk about your experiences, advocacy news, research, and today's heroes for kids. We are here to bring hope to the unthinkable but real experience of a child diagnosed with cancer. Jack's Angels' advocacy mission is to provide a voice for children with cancer to effect change for a more hopeful future for those to come. Childhood Cancer Talk Radio starts right now. Here is your host, Janet Demeter.
What a wonderful world.
Welcome to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure on toginet.com. I'm Janet Demeter, your host, and I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation with our special guest today, Lisa Solis DeLong, author, nurse, bereavement facilitator, patient advocate, and last but not least, mom. She joins us for a candid discussion of her experience raising two sons with cancer in a family of 6, loss and faith, and how she was able to find new joy in her life after losing her son, Justin. If childhood cancer hasn't directly affected your life and you're just curious, this show is for you too. We're dedicated to educating and raising awareness of the general public to the current realities of our medical research system for those affected by childhood cancer, because we still do not know what causes it. It can happen to anyone, and God help you if it does and nothing has changed in our system. Advocacy for our kids is the great game changer. Cancer is the leading disease-related cause of death in children in the United States, and yet only 4% of our National Cancer Institute research budget targets pediatric cancer. So I like to ask you, I always ask this question, what does your phone do when it hits 8%? Mine shuts down, okay? Clearly the 4% is a strong indication that saving our children's lives is currently not a priority in our medical research system. The promise of a quick return in marketing drugs to the masses dominates the decision-making process for research investment, even when it's our tax dollars allotted for cancer research, apparently. It's true. There have been strong advances in leukemia research for adults, which has come down and been applied to children's medicine. We've have more children surviving now leukemia than ever, thank God. But what about the deadliest childhood cancers with very low survival rate that have been neglected for years? How does all this affect the experience of a family with such a diagnosis? Well, in a nutshell, you basically hear that it's because the numbers of patients is too small for the investments in research to be immediately lucrative. Of course, this is setting aside the fact that most scientists agree that discovering more about the deadliest childhood cancers would lead to greater understanding of biology and ultimately a cure, which invariably creates new jobs in industry, i.e. long-term gains on investment. So what does this vote of insignificance do to a child? What does it do to the family of the child diagnosed with a brain tumor, for example, which is the leading cause of cancer-related death in children and one of the least funded areas of research by a government? For many of us, it is grief at diagnosis and an underlying anger that we're supposed to swallow with the idea that for all practical purposes, our child's life doesn't matter to these unnamed investors out there. And for decades, because there have been no effective progress in this field of brain tumors, as an example, for over 40 years. That's a lot of children. And that's a lot of decimated families expected to accept a death sentence. So, on a lighter note, today, if you're just tuning in, I'm Janet Demeter, your host of Childhood Cancer Talk Radio. You're on toginet.com. We have many newly bereaved parents out there, and many for whom this is their greatest fear. So how do we begin to talk about it and have hope? Well, this is our topic today, and I'd like to welcome Lisa Solis DeLong, registered nurse, author, nationally known speaker and advocate, and bereavement facilitator. Lisa's firstborn son died at the age of 15 when he relapsed after a 10-year remission from leukemia. And then 6 years later, her youngest son was also diagnosed with the same kind of leukemia, completed treatments, and is now a healthy teenager. She also has 2 courageous daughters. Welcome to the show, Lisa. Are you there?
I am. Thank you, Janet.
Yay, I'm so glad you're here.
Yay, I'm glad to be here. It's awesome.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about your book, Blood Brothers, and, how your experience with your sons inspired that.
Well, it's very interesting because as a nurse, I think I really learned to pay attention to what's happening in life. I learned early on as a nurse that interesting things and strange things that didn't make sense, happened to people all around us. I remember taking care of a young 2-year-old little boy who had been brutally harmed by his father. This was back in the early 80s. And thinking, how does this kind of thing happen? And just noticing that bad things happen to good people and to innocent people. And so I think that awareness led me along the way when my son Justin was diagnosed at the age of 5. I took him in for his kindergarten checkup, and the doctor took one look at him and said, "You nurses, you know how to take care of everyone's kids but your own." And
what did that feel like?
Yeah, it was really devastating. And I really want to make clear that I have no bitterness toward him saying that, in that it really helped me to see myself and also medicine and the passion that people have behind the work that we do on the medical side. And those words are really words of passion on his part. I think that medical people can be trained a lot better to handle emotional moments, because he really cared about Justin and he cared about me. And it was just a volatile moment. So I like to clarify that. But
well, we're all human.
Yeah, we are.
Doctors.
Yes, we are. And as a mom and a nurse, I really felt, and still do feel, like the people that step into our world as patients are very, very brave and courageous. So I'm very grateful to them. But so just, I just kind of paid attention to all the things that were going on along the way. The shock of Justin's diagnosis, I really didn't see it coming. As many parents who have kids with cancer, we don't see it. You can't see a brain tumor initially. You can see changes in your child's behavior. And I couldn't see the leukemia. Justin's biggest symptom at the time was that he was very pale. And he started looking pale for about 2 weeks. I noticed this paleness, but he didn't have any obvious symptoms. He didn't have any obvious bruising. He had a low-grade fever that came and went. And since I had his appointment coming up, I just thought, well, I'll have the pediatrician check him out. And, so again, that devastation of, he saw it right away. The pediatrician saw it right away. So then you just really feel like a failure. It's like, I'm a nurse. I'm a mom, his mom. Why didn't I see this? How could I have prevented it? All those things that we go through. So
it just goes to show, whether you're a nurse or not, it's a similar feeling. You feel like you should have known, So it's kind of like a double whammy. You're being a nurse, and I'm saying that.
Yeah, and I've had discussions with physicians about this too, that they've had kids who become ill as well and had the same thing where they didn't see it, and even though they have the medical knowledge, there is some, I think, innate aspect of being a parent that we don't always see what's right in front of us that can become obvious to an outsider, And
right.
I think that's just that we're terrified that these things can happen. So you kind of like, no, it's not it. You know what I mean? So there's like this balancing act of, and even listening to a show like this, you can get really scared. Like, oh, if I listen to this show, is somebody going to get cancer? And I know
right.
that mindset because I've thought it myself before and many times. But I realize that for me, and I think for most people, being informed is our best way of diffusing fear. And
absolutely,
yeah. And so I appreciate you, having a show like this and having me on to have this conversation. But that's what. So you had asked me about what inspired me was about the book was over the years when Justin he was better for almost 10 years, and then his leukemia came back very suddenly in the middle of his 8th grade year, and then he died 5 months later. And so, again, I was just paying attention. I was doing a lot of journaling, didn't know what or why. I just knew I had to get all this information out and out of my head. I had replayed the way he died over and over and over again in my mind, and it was driving me crazy, that
right.
feeling of I just want to stop thinking about this, but at the same time, I don't want to forget.
Yes.
And so I found writing to be a very helpful and comforting tool. So once I went to my parents' house and I wrote for 3 days. I just cried and wrote and cried and wrote and cried and wrote until I couldn't cry anymore. Wow. And my goal at the time was I just want to be able to say Justin's name without falling apart. I don't want to forget him, and I don't want to hide him either. You know, at the time my daughters were 10 and 6, and Jacob was only 6 months old, and I just thought, you know, we got to do this, but I don't really know how. But I'm just going to write it down so I can at least say his name without falling apart. And so then over time, we grieved as a family. And again, I think my nursing background really gave me a head start on how to do that, in that I had seen other people grieve and didn't feel like, oh, why me? This, you know, I felt more like, well, why not me? These things happen to people. And so I came into it with that already in place, and I think that was really helpful. And then from there, did a lot of philanthropic work and a lot of growing as a nurse and all kinds of things in those years. But then 6 years later is when Jacob, my youngest, was also diagnosed with the same kind of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And then at that point, I was just like mad.
Wow.
I was just mad.
I don't blame you. I mean, you know, it's bad enough, you know, to have one, and there are instances where there's more than one, but it's, you know, that's even more rare. That's just plain unfair.
Yeah, it definitely felt that way. And you know, that mindset of why not me wasn't nearly as strong. I felt more like, are you kidding me? Like, I've done everything right. I've grieved with my family. We're all in a healthy state of mind. We've stayed, you know, my husband and I have stayed married. I went into philanthropic work. I was working for a foundation here in Santa Clarita that helps families with kids with cancer. And I was very happy. Again, I felt like there was purpose to Justin's passing, and
when we come back from the break, Lisa, I want you to talk about that, because I know of that foundation. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about what that transition was like for you. This is Childhood Cancer Talk Radio. I'm Janet Demeter. We'll be back with Lisa DeLong in a moment.
Stay tuned. Janet will be right back with more on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure.
This is God in Country, the collision of faith and politics, hosted by nationally known speaker, Reverend Dr. Sean Michael Greener. Not your typical Rev. Dr. Sean is a proud military veteran, former law enforcement officer, and founder of the internationally regarded Executive Protection Team. Dr. Sean holds a bachelor's degree in biblical counseling and master's and doctorate degrees in theology, and is currently pursuing a doctorate in ministry with a Hebrew worldview focus. Through his counseling, elite life coaching, and national speaking, this ninja pastor tells it like it is. This series is biblically and politically engaged with the pedal to the metal. Join host and author of the acclaimed yet controversial book, Excellence Killed the Church, How Mediocrity is Destroying America, Dr. Sean Michael Greener. Every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this radio network.
Homeschooling? Have questions? Get your pen and paper ready. It's the sociable homeschooler, Vivian McNinney. Fridays at 5, 4 Central on TogiNet.com. After a handsome blue-eyed Texan fell in love with Vivian at the Victoria Station in London, she found herself at DFW Airport with a tiny suitcase and a snazzy little duffel bag. Well, 25 years later, she is now happily married to that blue-eyed cowboy. They have 4 grown children ages 24 to 18 who became willing guinea pigs when she unwittingly stumbled upon the world of homeschooling. Wildflower Academy flourished for 15 years. They survived and thrived, and you can too. Vivian will be covering a wide range of issues that face homeschoolers. What do you do with kids in the summer? How to set up your one-room schoolhouse? How obedience is paramount? And what to do with those snakes? Plus, you'll be sharing ideas and insights that she gleaned from other homeschoolers. So join us for an engaging hour with the sociable homeschooler, Vivian McNinney. Friday afternoons at 5, 4 Central on TogiNet.com.
Your love
welcome back to more great conversation on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, because every child's life deserves hope. Here's Janet.
Welcome back to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure. I'm Janet Demeter, your host, where we aim to provide comfort, validation, community understanding, education, and awareness to those affected by childhood cancer and those that love them. Today we're speaking with Lisa Solis DeLong, author, speaker, patient advocate, and bereavement facilitator. Lisa, before the break, we were talking about your beginning to put your feet in the waters of philanthropic work and really finding some new meaning there. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. 3 years after Justin died, that's how long it took me to feel like I could even think about another human being, honestly. So my encouragement to the freshly bereaved who are listening is to really be gentle with yourself and to be patient with yourself. I was able to do that at the time, and it was a simple way of living, but it also gave me a chance to feel what I really needed to feel. And going back to work as a nurse at that time was impossible. I couldn't walk into a hospital. I couldn't stand hearing the sound of IV pumps and the smell of a hospital. Some people can do that, and I'm amazed, and it's an awesome ability. It wasn't something I could do. And so I was not only faced with the loss of my son, but I was also faced with potentially the loss of my career. And so I really just was, like when you're in that adrenaline of fight or flight, I was like in just frozen mode after that. I did the daily needs of the family, took care of the kids. Even then had some moments of what I would consider like crazy mental thinking.
Is this 3 years out that you're talking about?
Early on.
Before.
Before, yeah.
Gotcha.
So in the freshness of it, I don't want to downplay that, because this was not an easy thing. This was not like, I got over it and I went on. No.
Do you want to hear a funny description? A funny description of that adrenaline, that dark, anxious energy is a second gear going 65 miles an hour in my little Honda. Yeah. For those who drive a standard shift, and I couldn't stop. Just couldn't stop. Mm-hmm. It's dark.
It's very dark. It's a dark time, and it's very, I think, intentional. I think we're designed that way, personally, to really go into what we're made of and what we, and really how strong we are and what's behind all of this, if we allow ourselves to really explore it. And so thankfully I was able to stay home. But for example of fresh grief, crazy, I just want to share is, one time Jacob, who was, he was just a toddler at the time. This was probably about 9 months or so after Justin died. And he was just crawling around, and I was sitting on the floor, and I was staring at a photo of Justin. It was the photo we used for his portrait. And you know how this is when you're grieving, you have this like daydreamy kind of mind all the time. You're like off in another land. And this is true also at diagnosis, by the way. It doesn't necessarily begin at the death of a loved one, or the death of a child. It's also the death of what we had known as healthy, that we'd had health, and that idea of health and longevity died.
Right.
And so I was looking at Justin's portrait in this daydreamy mode and totally ignoring Jacob. And I had this thought. I thought, I'm not going to love this baby, this little baby that's crawling around me and toddling around. I'm not going to love him. I'm not going to allow myself to ever feel this kind of pain again. And I'll take care of him, but I'm not going to allow myself to fully love him. And all of a sudden, Jacob crawled up on my lap, and he was too small to talk. So, I didn't know what he was doing. He just crawled up on my lap, and then he slapped me across the face as hard as he could, like just a big old whack across the face. And I was just stunned, and I just looked at him, and I swear, if he could talk, I know he would have said, "I'm here, love me."
Aw, of course.
And at that moment, I really was pivotal in my grief experience that I feel like, gosh, I have a choice here. Like my mind can actually go to the dark side of I'm not going to love again because I'm too afraid. Or it can go toward, oh no, I'm going to love as much as possible because I only get it to do it now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? So like all this time in the dark, all this mulling around in the dark, it really can bring out moments like this. And because I paid attention and wrote them down, that's what really inspired the book. Is I thought, oh my gosh, the only way I could have learned this was to have that moment and to have that moment with Jacob. And to have that moment with Jacob before he got sick. You see what I'm saying? So it's like this whole, oh gosh, like this just an awareness that you just go, oh my goodness, all this is going on and it's useful. And it doesn't feel like it at the time. So I don't want to minimize that, but it's valuable. All of this experience is valuable. So ultimately, that's what led to writing the book. And I was not a writer. I had not taken any, I took the minimal courses in college that you need. And so when Jacob got well enough, after his treatments, I started taking a class at our local junior college. And I just took any writing class I could take just to fit the schedule of Jacob's appointments and chemo and stuff. And I just needed to get to a writing. It was really in me, like I got to get to a writing class. So then that led to other classes and ultimately a book. But at the 3-year mark, I went back to, not short on words, huh? I am short. I'm only 5 feet tall, but I'm not short on words. But I went back to work as a nurse at 3 years. I had this feeling, I think I'm ready to engage in society again. And I went back to mother-baby nursing, which is what I had done for most of my career. And while I was taking care of a patient, I just very early on, probably when I had been back about 6 months, I was like, I'm just kind of bored here. I want to talk about deep, meaningful things about death and death-related issues. And then that was strange to me. I was like, what? It's so happy here. Like, why do I feel not content, And then I had a patient come in who had I was working in the nursery and they brought in he was a little baby born a little early. And one of the nurses came in and told me that the reason that this baby had to be delivered early was because his young mom she had breast cancer and it had relapsed on breast while she was pregnant. And it was just, they were trying to be delicate with me because they knew my background. But for me, the first thing I thought about was, oh my goodness, I really want to talk to this mom. Right. Like the mom of the mom, I was like, I really, this is going to be devastating for them. And it was the first time in my grief experience that I felt like I cared about another human being. And that's when I knew that that grief was now beside me. I don't think it's ever behind me. I think of grief as a relationship with like any other person in my life. Like it's beside me and we're going to do this together now.
Wow, that's interesting. It's a very helpful way of looking at it as well. Then it's not something so scary, it's a partner and it's part of your life. Not something to be shunned and stuck in a box, but something that actually is going to help you learn how to live your life better rather than, oh, this horrible cloud and this is the worst possible experience that could happen to anyone and yada, yada, yada. Instead, it sounds like your heart started to open as soon as that your heart was looking for that woman, actually. Someone with the same need to find a deeper appreciation or a deeper feeling.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that has continued to happen. After I did leave working as a nurse at that time and started working for a nonprofit out here called the Michael Hoffman Foundation for Children's Cancer. And I was their family outreach coordinator. And again, it was that sense, just like you said, of, wow, I've been waiting for these people. Like, this feels like the right connection. I'm happy here. I could have conversations with newly diagnosed families every day. And I could visit families at the hospital who were struggling with this new life that they were thrown into. And I just felt purposeful and like I had a skill that I couldn't have acquired any other way. And it was useful. So I love how you said that. Like, she had been waiting for me and I'd been waiting for her. I think
Well, you
show up
said
when we need
that. You said that yourself. Like you had, where was this feeling coming from? Why did you want to talk about these dark things? You were just looking for the person.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's
Funny
true.
how we're led and then go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was led. Right?
Yeah, because we don't want to be led there. Like, I didn't
Right.
want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, when Justin was first diagnosed, you know, we went to a lovely, beautiful Ronald McDonald camp. It was their family camp, and I remember meeting other families and other people in the situation, and I thought, I don't want anything to do with any of you when I get home. I don't want to be part of this club. My son's going to get better, and we're not going to come back. You know, really, that was how I felt, and I had no idea that this would be the course of the rest of my life, that I would have, at that point, I would have another child with cancer later. You know, I these things that we go through in life, we don't see what's ahead. But I've come to the point in my life where I just really pay attention to what's going on, and I have a lot less fear. I'm not going to say I don't have fear, but I have a lot less fear about the tragic events that come. Because I've found an inner strength that I know is present, whether it's a tragic day or a great day, you know, a fun day or whatever. So, and that sounds kind of cheesy, but it's really true.
Well, Lisa, you're definitely one of my heroes. You're a powerful lady, and just by your willingness to walk through it and trust, I mean, that's half the battle right there. And if you're just tuning in, this is Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, powered by Jack's Angels Foundation, a 501c3 charitable organization dedicated to pediatric brain tumor awareness, support, and research, and the greater childhood cancer advocacy movement. For more information, visit jacksangels.org. After the break, we'll continue our conversation with Lisa DeLong about her book Blood Brothers, a memoir of faith and loss while raising two sons with cancer, and finding new hope through the fear or actual loss of a child to cancer. But first, we're going to listen to these messages from our sponsors at toginet.com. Don't go away.
Stay tuned. Janet will be right back with more on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure.
This is God in Country, the collision of faith and politics, hosted by nationally known speaker, Reverend Dr. Sean Michael Greener. Not your typical Rev. Dr. Sean is a proud military veteran, former law enforcement officer, and founder of the internationally regarded Executive Protection Team. Dr. Sean holds a bachelor's degree in biblical counseling and master's and doctorate degrees in theology, and is currently pursuing a doctorate in ministry with a Hebrew worldview focus. Through his counseling, elite life coaching, and national speaking, this ninja pastor tells it like it is. This series is biblically and politically engaged with the pedal to the metal. Join host and author of the acclaimed yet controversial book, Excellence Killed the Church, How Mediocrity is Destroying America, Dr. Sean Michael Greener, every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this radio network. This is Uncommon Sense for Leaders, a forum for exploring leadership from the intellect, the heart, and the spirit. Whether you're a leader now or aspire to be a leader in the future, you owe it to yourself to learn about the big ideas that have shaped the careers of compelling communicators, masters of influence, and highly effective leaders. Uncommon Sense for Leaders. Tune in to hear thought-provoking ideas on every aspect of leadership. You can expect dynamic discussions with special guests, quick tips you can apply immediately for better results, and the tools you need to take you from where you are to where you want to be as a leader. Are you ready to crack the code for achieving unprecedented results? Then join the host for Uncommon Sense for Leaders, Catherine Carlisi, every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the All Business Radio Network.
You'll always have my shoulder when you
welcome back to more great conversation on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, because every child's life deserves hope. Here's Janet.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Janet Demeter, your host, and we'll be speaking once again with Lisa Solis DeLong, bereavement expert, speaker, author, and nurse, about finding new joy and hope in life after the loss of a child. But first, it's time for a brief moment of advocacy news. Folks, the childhood cancer advocacy movement is gaining momentum and strength, and it needs your support. The only way for our laws to change to accommodate public demand and public need is for that public to let their hearts be known. Currently, only 4% of the NCI budget for research targets pediatric research, while cancer is a leading cause of death in children after accidents and injuries. The STAR Act, S-T-A-R Act, is a compilation of previous bills that did not pass, including the most important details and expanding upon them in a comprehensive manner. The Childhood Cancer Survivorship, Treatment, Access, and Research, STAR Act, would expand opportunities for childhood cancer research, improve efforts to identify and track childhood cancer incidents, enhance the quality of life for childhood cancer survivors, and ensure publicly accessible expanded access policies that provide hope for patients who have run out of options. Folks, according to the Nicholas Connor Institute, only 25% of the House is signed on. Please encourage your reps to sign it until we begin. Let's see. I'm sorry. I almost lost my place here on you. I'm so sorry about that. Until we begin to let our wishes be known to the NCI, nothing will change, and we have to do that through Congress. To access your representatives' contact information, visit for the House, www.house.gov/representatives/find. And for the Senate, it's senate.gov/index. The most recent House resolution is H-Res 586, Chad and Jack's DIPG resolution, calling for a National Awareness Week for DIPG and its thousands of departed heroes, and brave kids currently fighting to stay alive, and more awareness for the neglect of pediatric cancer in our medical research system. Using diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, DIPG, as an example, we learn how the second most common pediatric brain tumor is responsible for the majority of brain tumor deaths in children each year, yet there's been no progress in its terminal prognosis in over 35 years, with an average of 20,000 years of life lost each year. H-Res 586 calls for more consideration of low survival rate cancers and years of life lost in the research grant process with the National Cancer Institute. Both H-Res 586 and the STAR Act were introduced in a bipartisan way and are both endorsed by the chairman of the Congressional Caucus for Childhood Cancer, Representative McCall of Texas, 10th District, and Representative Van Hollen of Maryland's 3rd District, Republican and Democrat, respectively. Please encourage your House and Senate reps to sponsor these important pieces of legislation for our children with cancer in the United States. And for the rest of the world, I'm asking our global citizens to hold the United States accountable to becoming the leader in childhood cancer affirmative action. Advocate Save the Date, CureFest in Washington, D.C. this year, is going to be September 17th and 18th. The Truth 365, look up their page on Facebook, has a film coming out next week. Please like their page and help circulate. These two networks have been largely responsible for the acceleration of awareness and growth in our movement. Use them. You are listening to Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, powered by Jack's Angels Foundation. I'm Janet Demeter, your host, and we're returning to our conversation with Lisa Solis DeLong, author, speaker, patient advocate, nurse, sorry, Lisa, and mom. You're not a cancer patient.
About let's keep it that way.
We're going to be talking about finding new joy and hope in life after the loss of a child. And Lisa, you know, before the break, we were talking about a number of things, and what struck me was the comment you made about when you were with Jacob and you went to that, the camp, the Ronald McDonald camp with him, and you just wanted to go home and then pretend you didn't know any of those people because you weren't going to go down that road again. And it just reminded me of how when my son was first diagnosed with DIPG, which is terminal, I didn't want to reach out to anyone because that in a way of itself was like admitting that he was going to die. And I couldn't do it. This is weird tightrope of denial and reality that you walk that's so excruciating. And I mean, I even had your book and your number, and I couldn't reach out, and it was crazy. Just nuts.
Yeah. It's so shocking to the system that I think we spend a lot of time in those early weeks of adjustment, and just taking in the information, and it's like a tornado that comes in and just destroys every structure in your mind that you had in place. And at diagnosis, that structure sways and shifts and gets split apart a little bit because you're exposed to so much more of the possibility of all the tragic things that can happen, but it isn't until a child dies that it's really that the whole roof is blown off and every structure you had in place to keep you sane is just tousled about. All your belief systems, your family systems, everything. And, when they're first diagnosed and you're in it and you're invited to a family camp like I was, and it was actually Justin that I was at the camp with when I felt that way.
Okay.
So I didn't make that clear, but over two decades of doing this, it gets a little blurry. Like sometimes I'll accidentally say Jacob instead of Justin, and it gets kind of crazy. But I think it's just a natural defense mechanism, really, to say, no, I'm not going to be a part of this group. My child is going to get well, or I'm going to get well. If you're the patient, and we just have to diffuse some of the information and let it just sift through our hands a little bit and just go to the wayside because we can't take it all in at once. Right. And so I think it's a very natural response to not want to be part of the group. And on the flip side of that are people who are doing philanthropic work like you and I, and who want to help in these deep, dark places in life, these crevices that we're in. We want to help people that are in those crevices, but it's not easy to get people to participate and stay with advocacy and all the different kinds of things that are required to really support patients and to get answers and to expand awareness and get answers and cures, So it's a really delicate tightrope, like what you said, just that, it's because that feeling that we have when our kids were diagnosed is the same feeling that the whole community has. We're scared.
Yeah.
Don't look at it and maybe it'll go away. Hide under the covers, right? Like when we were kids, the scary noise.
Absolutely.
Hide and maybe it'll go away. But,
it's just way too scary. And I have to also divulge that, actually the gentleman who gave me your book was a friend of mine's husband who works for a pharmaceutical company. And I talked to him quite a bit right after Dak was diagnosed with TIPG, and he was like, oh, yeah, that's one of those rare diseases. That's one of those orphan diseases. It's so sad. And, yeah, there's just no research funding for those. And you're like, why? It's 40 years. Why? Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, well, there's not enough numbers for investors. And that just, those words just were branded in my brain and now are the reason why I do what I do. It's because I have to. It's part of my healing. It's become, advocacy has become, how I understand it right now, my purpose. It makes me sane, whereas it would drive somebody else crazy, right? And other people don't process and heal that way. So it's like, you just have to be very considerate, and know that you're there for a reason and you'll help the people you're supposed to help. And it's okay if not everyone sees things your way, because we all see things different. Some people get very insistent that their healing path be everyone's healing path, and that creates some hurt and some, again, more separation rather than, hey, this is just what I do. If you get something out of it, great. Just know that we care about you, and just move forward from there. There's someone to fit everywhere where there's a need. It's just a matter of allowing it to take its course. But
it's true. And there's nothing like loss. In all of the bereavement groups that I've led, it's interesting that this topic comes up of the people that leave you in the process.
Yes.
It's very common. It's very common. And also the people who attack you in the process. And it's a well-documented aspect of the grief experience for a lot of people. And the irony of it is, you're in so much pain at the time that none of it doesn't make sense.
Doesn't seem real.
It doesn't
like,
seem real.
what?
Yeah. And in hindsight, since I've had 15 years of exploring this and living it, it really, there really is benevolence behind it. And as painful as it is to move out of the community perhaps that we're in when this kind of devastation happens, because people are trying to be good and kind and helpful, and it's really because we as the griever don't see things the same anymore, that we are the ones really who are segueing out, and away, and it's just a natural course, and it can lead to incredible new discoveries, self-discoveries, and also great accomplishments like starting a foundation and starting a radio show and all these things, because you have the tenacity that other people don't have. And when you say that you had, this image branded in your brain, and now that's what where your focus is, it may appear to be troublesome to others, but you can look at any successful, advocacy kind of tasks that have been accomplished by people with great passion, and that comes from, very often it comes from loss. So it's not that surprising. It's just very difficult, especially in the early years. It's very difficult because it's like you're just paddling around going, I don't know where I belong anymore. Yeah. But this needs to matter, and it becomes your calling, and I really can relate to that. It is a surprisingly painful process, and not everybody. It isn't everybody's process. Like you said, everybody grieves differently, and we all have different gifts and callings, but it certainly opens you up to explore it.
Absolutely.
I remember there was a mom.
We're going to have to take a break really quick. I want to talk about this when we come back. I appreciate so much what you're sharing with us, Lisa. This is Janet Demeter, your host with Childhood Cancer Talk Radio. We'll be back in just a moment with more with Lisa.
We'll be right back with more on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, where kids come first for the cure.
Have you heard? The pages of American Patchwork and Quilting magazine come to life on our new weekly online radio show, American Patchwork and Quilting. Join Pat Sloan, our blogging and quilt designer host, as she talks about the latest trends, ideas, and inspirations. Her guests include quilt pattern designers, authors, quilt shop owners, and our editors, all quilters, just like you. Call in with your questions. Get quilting tips from industry experts. Learn about free patterns. Hear behind-the-scenes stories from our magazines, American Patchwork and Quilting, Quilt Sampler, and Quilts and More. Get the scoop on free stuff and find out more about the best independent quilt shops in North America. To listen to a live show, tune in Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Just log on to allpeoplequilt.com/radio. To hear past shows, go to iTunes and search for American Patchwork and Quilting Radio. We hope you'll join us because we know that quilting changes everything.
I am not the woman I used to be. I'm free with Minister Diane Jones. Monday nights at 10, 9 Central on TogiNet. This is your chance, ladies, to hear stories of hope and healing from someone who's been there. Someone who has fought back from the horrors of incest. Minister Diane's innocence was stolen from her in the land of alcoholism and mental illness, which led to her being emotionally, physically, and sexually abused by her parents. Yet in spite of this trauma, she has gone on to become a successful wife, mother, registered nurse, and minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm not the woman I used to be. I'm Free is a straight-up show to enlighten you and to lighten your load. Do not let the weight of this world or the things that have happened to you control your life. For more on the show and Diane and her book, The Story of Me, email her directly from her show page here on TogiNet. Then, join us for I'm Not the Woman I Used to Be. I'm Free with Minister Diane Jones. Monday nights at 10, 9 Central on TogiNet.com.
Welcome back to more great conversation on Childhood Cancer Talk Radio, because every child's life deserves hope. Here's Janet.
Lisa DeLong, our guest, brings a strong knowledge base of healthcare from both the front line as a nurse for 30 years and the patient perspective, and has the unique ability to articulate about the most delicate subject, the loss of a child. She understands the sacred nature of healthcare and the transformational joy which accompanies purpose-driven and worthwhile work. I'm Janet Demeter with Childhood Cancer Talk Radio on TogiNet.com. Lisa, before the break, we were talking about the transformation that you go through at different stages and different times of grief, and how your world changes and how sometimes people fall away. And it's really you that's changing and the world around you reflecting that change. I wanted to ask you, how did you know when things were finally getting to that point where you could breathe and you just suddenly realized, I'm not in the most horrible pain every day?
It was really around the 3-year mark, and I have found that that's the 3-year mark is quite pivotal for a lot of bereaved people. And I think it's important societally to understand that. We have the tendency to be more like, it's been 3 months? You mean, I can't believe she's not over it. Or
we got that.
He died 3 weeks ago. Aren't you over it? Like, we are so backwards as a society when it comes to devastating loss. It just is amazing to me how unkind we are to ourselves to say, this is going to be different from now on, and I'm going to need a while to adjust. And so for me, that the 3-year mark was where I had the urge to get back into community again. And it was during that first year back as a nurse that I felt like I had room to care for another human being. I had felt like I had something to offer another human being. And that's when you can really tell when grief is starting to move from in your face and blocking your view to, okay, it's moving aside. The pain is there, but it doesn't happen. I don't feel it as often. And the way it was described to me once was that grief is like, especially when it's fresh, it's like having a hand right in front of your face. And you have to, it right up close, like touching your nose. This big hand is right in front of your face. And you can't see past the hand unless you dodge right or dodge left, and it's like that for a long time. It's like that. And you get tired of the dodging it, and it's right there. And then the second year, the hand moves back a little bit. And you have a little more room. You don't have to work so hard at dodging it. And then the third year is where the hand is back far enough away from your view, blocking your view, that it's still there. You can see it in the distance, but you don't have to work so hard to dodge it and feel like it's going to punch you in the face quite so hard, And
right.
And that's really a pretty. I like that analogy because it makes sense to me. But
question for you. Insofar as, this process gradually occurs, what role do spiritual experiences played in that process for you? I know that for many of us bereaved people, newly or not, the idea of some sort of aha moment or experience of clarity is like, oh, let me hear. I want to hear.
Yeah.
It really brings that hope of the reality of that other dimension in our world that our society doesn't recognize, which is part of the reason why this whole process is so difficult, I think, to a certain extent.
Yeah, the spiritual experiences that really came to me when Justin, the night before Justin died, I had a dream that he passed away the way he did, and that I said to let him go as I stood at the door of the ICU, and then I actually lived all of that. He died just the way I had seen in a dream, and it was very impactful. I mean, the real life experience in real time, of course, was devastating. But the thing that lingered in my mind in adjusting to life without him was that I had seen it happen before it happened. And that was very profound to me because I had never had anything like that happen in my life. I had never experienced anything like that before. It was a very clear dream. It was very detailed. And even now I have it imprinted in my mind that I can see how it was when I dreamt it. And so because I come from a Christian background, I never doubted that God was a presence or that there was a plan or a purpose. So that was still there for me, even when in my grief state. But what really changed for me was looking at my faith differently, looking at people differently, looking at the whole order of things on the planet differently, because I saw this thing happen before it happened. So it was like, well, this is true for my son, then it's true for everyone. That there is some what I call chaotic events in our experience where it's the perfect combination of chaos and order. And I love that word chaotic because it really
I've never heard that.
Yeah. It's a powerful word, and it really is a combination of chaos and order. And then that's exactly how I felt the day that Justin died. I remember thinking everything went perfectly wrong. How does that happen? And as I replayed everything over and over, everything went perfectly wrong, from his having a fever to not getting to the ER quick enough to whatever thoughts I had about what should have been done, and conversations, phone calls, all of it. And all of it had to play out that way in order for him to die the way he did, because he died of adult respiratory distress syndrome, which was a breathing problem. And it wasn't actually the leukemia that killed him. So it was just this big, huge awareness. And so that spiritual stuff really held me over and made me look at life differently.
Well, it really helps me to hear it, because everything went wrong when my son died. It was, the hospice team and the hospital weren't on the same page. My nurse, my lifeline to everything had been put on administrative leave, and she wasn't allowed to call me. I had no way of getting my son intravenous medicine when his ability to swallow was disappearing. It's like no one knew what was caught up at the hospice on what the procedure, what happened to a child when they die of DIPG. Basically, they go into respiratory failure and they lose the ability to swallow. So all this stuff happening, I'm like, oh my God. And it was weird. It was like part of me was standing outside of myself going, this is very wrong, but it's supposed to happen, but it's right. I was so angry.
Yes. But did you really have that awareness at the time? Like, this is so wrong, but there's something right in it. Did you actually feel that way at the time?
It wasn't a peaceful feeling. I was furious. Because I thought it was supposed to happen a certain way, and doves were going to fly, and I was going to see the light, and I was going to love him perfectly at the last moment, I mean, I don't know, but it was...
I hear what you're saying.
It was a nightmare.
I hear what you're saying.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, but it is that, it's that underlying... Because I think when we experience great loss like this, and while it's happening, there's like this big, like if we could see ourselves as in a big nut case, because we feel like a nut case, but a nut casing, like an acorn casing, like it just got stepped on and cracked open. And then all these experiences can come in that we didn't have any sensitivity to before. Because I definitely felt that way when Justin was dying. Like when this process was happening, I felt like I am feeling things and seeing things that I had never had any clue about. And it's all perfect. It's perfectly wrong. And that's...
It's perfectly wrong, yes.
It's perfectly wrong. And there's...
Just for you, too. Just for you.
Yeah. and beyond that was this experience I had with other dying children, to see their composure and their acceptance. And in their words, things like little Elizabeth, who was dying and said, I had to wait such a long time for you, Mommy. And meaning in another lifetime. And those were things that I didn't have any clue about, or I just didn't think about it. But because of her and that spiritual experience, I was able to really see that our children are not victims, but really participants in their life.
I found out that Jack had been with me all along in my life. Yes. But I didn't get that until after he had actually passed. Then I started, experiencing these things and heard really, really loud in my head the morning of his funeral this certain song that I had heard at a certain time in my life when I was really down, and it inspired me to keep living. And that same feeling just resonated with him. Mm-hmm. So you just never know what's gonna make you grow. I mean, I don't like saying, I don't know. There are good things about it. We don't want it to happen this way. No. But we're just saying that, through the experience, there is meaning, there is new life, there is new joy. But it's just, while you're going through it, there's no way it seems like that. No way.
Yeah. Yeah. And the important thing is to surround yourself with bereaved people or people who are going through the cancer experience who really see themselves as participants. Community. And there's a difference. If we continue to see ourselves as victims or our children as victims, it's really hard to pull out and see anything that's positive. And I'm grateful. I'm very grateful to have had the two boys to teach me this, because when Jacob got sick, I saw his ability that he's a participant. This is his life, and he's participating in the best and in the only way he can. So I'm very, very, very grateful that he's healthy and well, and that I'm able to speak and share and talk about this issue and being here.
Well, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to have known you and that you're sharing with us this. It allows me to look at my own experiences with a little more love and acceptance and meaning. I fall prey to diminishing or minimizing, but you can't, when it comes to our lives and our hearts and what keeps us going, we can't do that. The experience kind of forces you to take your life seriously and take your heart seriously and take those little things that normally you take for granted. You take them seriously. Mm-hmm. They'll lead you to new life.
And feel joy again. That's right.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
We hope you have found inspiration from today's show. For more about Janet Demeter and her mission, visit jacksangels.org. As founder and president, Janet strives to assure that children with cancer and their parents have a voice, raising awareness for the need to prioritize our children in the quest for a